We continue today with the 44th chapter of the book of Yechezkel. Yechezkel, God in the 43rd chapter returned, or Yechezkel's vision that God would return, Merkavah, the Kavod, presence of God to the temple, to Jerusalem. And there were places that Yechezkel, the temple was full. It was complete. And that's where God also, I should say, made promises to Yechezkel that he will dwell there forever. The Jewish people won't sin and shame God anymore. And that's where we continue. Vayashev oti derech shar hamikdash hachitzon haponech hadiv v'hu sagor. So then this person who's accompanying Yechezkel leads him back out of the outer gate that was eastward, but that gate is shut. Vayomer Elai Adonai Ashar Hazeh Sagur Yelo Yipateach V'ish Lo Yavovo Ki Adonai Elohei Yisrael Ba Vo V'Haya Sagur. And God said to me, this gate is to be kept shut and is not to be opened. No one will enter it because the God of Israel has entered it and therefore it shall remain shut. And that's one of the things we talk about in this temple, and we'll see more in this chapter. It's much more of a restricted place. And of course, the temple in some ways, or God's presence, is restricted. It's scary and dynamic and frightening. So we have the idea of Sinai, but that's momentary. God comes out to Sinai. We have to fence off the mountain. Nobody else is allowed to come in for those moments, for that little bit of time. But after that, anybody can come in. Anybody can go on Sinai. And in the temple, there were places that people could go, even if it was only once a year that the Kohen Gadol. Here, at least this gate is supposed to remain shut. And we'll see that that's a theme that continues. Pasuk Gimel, Et hanasi nasi hu yeshev bo le'echol lechem l'fnei Adonai miderech hulam ashar yavo midarko yitzeh. Only the prince may sit and eat bread before God. Since he is a prince, he will enter by way of the vestibule and shall depart the same way. And so this is in terms of the prince means here, presumably, is a reference to the king, where earlier we talk the word king and prince are used interchangeably. It led me the way of the northern gate to the front of the temple. I looked, and God's presence filled the temple, and I fell on my face. Ben Adam sim labcha re'ev einechu v'oznechu shma et kol asher ani medaber otach l'chol chukot beit Adonai l'chol torotav v'samta libcha limvo habayit b'chol motzei hamikdash. And said to me, mortal man, look closely and listen carefully to everything that I will tell you regarding all the laws, all the instructions of the temple. Note it, so that those enter the temple and all those who are not allowed to enter the temple. It's not the first time. We heard early in the book when the Aseh Merkavah, when God's presence came to Yechezkel, he fell on his face, and there he was very passive. God had to, in a sense, pick him up. And here Yechezkel once again falls on his face, but because of the presence of God. We're in Pasuk Vav, verse 6, Ve'amarta el Meri, El Beit Yisrael, and say to the rebellious house of Israel, enough of your abominations, what happened? You allowed uncircumcised, whether it be of spirit or of flesh, literally, not with a Brit Milah, to come to my sanctuary, profane my temple. When you offer up food, the fat and blood you've broken with my covenant, with your abomination, with all of your abominations. Lo shamarta mishmar kadashai, v'tasimun l'shomri mishmarti b'mikdashi lachem. You have not discharged the duties concerning my sacred offerings. You've not followed the rules of the temple properly. Kol amar Adonai Elohim. Ben Nechar Lev ve'erel basar lo yaval mikdashi v'chol bnei Nechar asher b'toch bnei Yisrael. So God says, no alien, no uncircumcised person will come enter my sanctuary. No alien, right? Only the Jews, no foreigners. And that is against, it doesn't say that anywhere in the Torah. We know that Shlomo HaMelech has Gentiles help him in the building, the construction of the temple. We know that we've learned about Yeshaya. Yeshaya talks about, right, let all the nations stream to the temple. That's what's going to happen in the future. So Yechezkel is a very restrictive, a very, very different vision. And this is one, like I said, many of them are in this chapter, the places where he seems to contradict other biblical laws. And this is one of them. And again, this going to see this theme. This is God's space. And as we said in yesterday's chapter, God said, my mizuzi, my mezuzah, my doorpost, I don't want next to the doorpost of the abomination. We're going to have to make different. We're going to have to separate the two. And so at least here, this uncircumcised is one aspect. Continuing in Pasuk Yud, verse 10, Kim haLevim asher achaku me'alai b'tot Yisrael asher to me'alai achrei guluhem v'nasu aveim avonam. But the Levites who went against me and led Bnei Yisrael astray, they will suffer their punishment. Vayav mikdashi mishartim pikudot el sharei habayit mishartim et habayit hema yishchatu et haolav et hazevach la'am ve'hema yamdu lifneim l'shartam. They will serve in the temple by the gates and perform the chores. They will slaughter the burnt offering, the sacrifice. They will tend is to serve them. Yanasher yishartu otam lifnei gilulehem vayulevet Yisrael mechshol avon al ken asati adi alehem ne'um Adonai Elohim v'nasu avonam. Because what happened? They served Bnei Yisrael. They brought Bnei Yisrael to worship idols. So now I'm going to have them serving and worshiping Bnei Yisrael. Not worshiping, I shouldn't say. They should serve Bnei Yisrael in Bnei Yisrael's worship of God. Okay, so this is seemingly, it's understood as being a great honor to serve God in the temple. So I don't understand how this is exactly a punishment, but okay. Verse 13, V'lo yikshu elai lakahen li v'la geshet al kol kadashai el kodshei hakadashim v'nasu klimatam v'toivatam asher asu. They will not approach me to serve as priests, to come near. They will bear the shame for all the things that they've done wrong. I'll appoint them to attend the duties of the temple, to perform all chores, everything that needs to be done in it. And this is not very different from what it says in the Torah when it talks about the jobs of Bnei Kat, Bnei Merari, Bnei Gershom, the three different families of the Leviim. So it's not clear to me exactly how this is some sort of comeuppance and karma, midah keneged midah, measure for measure, because it seems to be that's what they're supposed to be doing. Verse 15, V'kohanim haLevim b'nei tzadok, asher shamru et mishmeret mikdashi b'tut b'nei Yisrael me'alai hema yikruvu elai l'sharteni v'amdu lefanai la'akriv li chelev v'dam nu'um Adonai Elohim. But the priests descended from the families of Tzadok, who maintained the service of the sanctuary. They will approach me. They will minister me. They will stand before me. They will want to bring the fats and the blood. And I should have pointed out yesterday just a couple of things. One, you could say that this is also a contradiction in the Torah. All the descendants of Aaron become Kohanim. Now, if you do something that's against what it means to be a Kohen, then you're removed. But your family up to that point, lineage-wise here, it's restricted to only certain priests. Maybe it has to do, like I said yesterday, with some of the priests intermarrying and doing different things. We'll see described in the books of Ezra and Nehemiah and Zechariah and other books. But it's this restricted temple. And then also a couple chapters ago, Yisrael and Yehuda, we talked about the rod that Yechezkel picked up and put the two sticks together, the two pieces of the staff together, saying Yisrael and Yehuda will be united and they will be led by one shepherd, David. During the time of David, David is the one who switches the Kohen from Evyatar to Tzadok. Evyatar is the family. He's the last remaining Kohen from the city of Nov. And eventually Tzadok, the family of Evyatar, is exiled. It has to do going further back to the beginning of the book of Shmuel, of Eli and his evil sons. But it's during the days of David that a different family of Tzadok, takes over as the Kohanim. So it's not a surprise that if it's going to be this restricted temple and it's only going to be David, there's not going to be a kingdom of Israel anymore, that Tzadok would pair together with him. Continuing in verse 16, Hema yavo el mikdashi v'hema yukrevu el shulchani l'shartein v'shamru et mishmarti. Right, they're going to serve me in the temple. They're going to come to my table. Vayabavo el sharei hachatzer hapnimit b'gdei pishtam yilbashu v'lo yaleh aleim tzemer b'sar tam b'sharei hachatzer hapnimit uvaita. When they enter the inner courtyard, they will wear linen. There will be no wool upon them when they minister in the temple. Now, you could say that this is talking about specific things, and maybe it works out that way. But the Torah, clearly, the Kohanim are wearing wool and linen. There's a prohibition in the Torah of the bringing. There's a prohibition in the Torah of shatnez, of not mixing wool and linen clothing together. The exception was in the Big Day Kahuna, the Kohanim were allowed to wear wool and linen together. Here, we're told that the Kohanim are not allowed to wear wool and linen together, contradicting what it says about the Torah. You could say this is only the linen clothing they're talking about, but this is a contradiction. It's seemingly one of the ones that Hananiah went up to his attic with all those 300 barrels of oil. Continuing in verse 18, Pa'arei pishtim yiyu al rosham, u'michnesei pishtim yiyu al moknehem, lo yichagru bayaza. They'll have linen turbans and linen breeches and linen pants, and they will gird themselves, but they will not gird themselves with anything that causes sweat. It's not going to be cold in the temple. You can wear light clothing. If it's a tamel chatzera chitzona la chatzera chitzona ela am yifshetu et bigdeim asherim b'mishartim bam v'nichu otam b'lishkat hakodesh v'lavshu begadim acherim lo yikdeshu et ha'am b'vigdeim. When they go to the outer courtyard where the people are, they'll remove their vestments. We had an allusion to this also yesterday. You could say that this is also a prohibition. It doesn't require this anywhere in the Torah. Such a demand that they take off their clothing and put on regular clothing, put on regular garments. But again, it aligns with this more restricted idea of the temple that Yechezkel is describing. The Kohanim here are, it's almost like they live a dual life. It's almost like, in a sense, like Mendelssohn. They're the Kohanim in the temple, and outside the temple, they're just regular people. They're not Kohanim. They take off their clothing, as opposed to, I don't think that's the vision in the Torah. The Torah, it's the Kohen who goes out and sees the person with Sarat. The Kohen has to go out and minister the people. He's not just serving in the temple. He's not just restricted to being close to God in the temple. He has to bring that out of the temple to the other places. That's not the way, that's not Yechezkel's vision of the temple. The vision that Yechezkel is being given is one that's much, much more restricted. Again, it corresponds with many of the other sort of things in this book, the separation between just, as we talked about many times, Ben Adam, Yechezkel is man. There's a real difference between deity, between God and man in this book, etc., etc. Here's another thing that's more prohibitive in verse 20. Pasuk Rosham lo yigalechu, Pharaoh lo yishalechu, ksum yichsmu et roshem. They will neither shave their heads nor let their hair grow untrimmed. They will keep their hair trimmed. We don't have that prohibition. V'yayin lo yishtu kol kohen, no priest shall drink wine b'voyam al chatzera pnimit, when he enters the courtyard. That we do have in the Torah, following the death of Nadav and Avihu, the two sons who sins of Aaron, who after that we're told you cannot drink before you minister in the temple. This is also not a regular Kohen is not allowed to marry a divorcee, is allowed to marry a widow. But here it says neither widow nor divorcee can they marry. That restriction is only the high priest in the temple. Right, they can only marry unmarried women, virgins, right? Or they may marry widows who are widows of priests. So there's a little bit of an allowance there for a woman who was married to a priest if their husband died, but it's more restrictive than in the Torah. And here we see part of the difference. They need to say what is sacred, what's profane. They need to live that life. So we're having a much stronger, much thicker separation here between Kodesh and Chol. It's two different sanctums, it's two different places. And so it's much more restrictive here for these Kohanim. V'alriv hema yamdu lamishpat b'mishpatai yishpetuhu v'toratai v'chukotai b'chol moadai yishmoru v'shabtotai yikadeshu. And when it comes to judgment, to cases, they will act as judge according to my rules. They will preserve my teachings and my laws, and they will maintain my Shabbat. Right? They're the ones who are in charge of religious doctrine fully. Vel meit adam lo yavol l'tama ki im la'av u'la'em u'leven u'levat la'ach u'la'achot asher lo hayta le'ishi yitama'u. Excuse me. This is in accordance with the beginning of Parshat Emor, I believe it is, where a Kohen cannot become ritually impure, can only go to the cemetery for these close relatives. And after they do become, you go to the cemetery because your father died. Then you can go to the cemetery, you count 7 days. And the day he re-enters the inner courtyard, then he needs to bring a sin offering. I don't think that it says that that's necessary in the Torah either. It seems more restrictive also. They will be my portion. I am their portion. This is a very different. This is the priest. This is limited. This is in the temple. This is close to God. This is God's sanctum. This is separate. We're going to make sure we're not going to have any watering down of religion. We're going to keep you at the highest point, the highest level, the highest way we can possibly watch you, Kohanim. And this way you remain close to me. You don't get in any way adulterated. You do not get in any way acculturated. You don't mix with others. There's not going to be any idolatry. And think about, I don't know if it came true, and certainly we talked to the Yechezkel's temple does not come true in terms of it's not what's built during the Second Temple period, his measurements, etc. But if we think at least to a certain point about a story that's not in the Tanakh, the story of the Maccabim in the book of the Maccabees, right? They're extremists. That's who they are. Matisyahu and his family, they go, they attack, they kill people who are worshiping idols. You might say that that's something that's told to us in the Torah, but you're still supposed to go to court. You can't just kill them straight away. There's an idea that Kohanim at times are Kanaim, they're zealots. So it's appropriate that some of them would be the people who would be chosen in this way. Continuing verse 29. The grain offerings and the different types of sin offerings, they can eat from them. V'reishit kol bikurei chol v'chol trumat kol mikol trumotechem lakohanim yiyeh v'reishit arisotechem titnu lakohen laniach bracha el beitecha. All the first fruits of every kind will go to the priest, and stuff from also the challah, from the challah you give to the priest. Priest will not eat anything, any birds or animals that died or was turned that was not slaughtered properly. And this also, I'm not sure if I understand this verse right. Obviously, the Torah prohibits all Jews. Animals have to be slaughtered properly. So this, I'm not sure why it says here it's only priests. Maybe there's something more specific to it. But we have here a vision from Yechezkel for his temple, which is much, much more restricted. We're going to separate. God says, I'm going to live in this temple forever. This Jewish people are not going to sin. That's what God says in the last temple. How's that going to happen? It's going to happen by making a steel barrier between what's Kodesh and Chol. We're going to have to know the difference between the two. And really, in a sense, if you want to put it on a more sociological level, if you think of the Haredi world, the ultra-Orthodox world, that's, in a sense, they think much more like this, like Yechezkel. We're not going to be contaminated. We're not going to become acculturated. We're not going to allow the opportunity of what we believe is Kodesh, what we believe is holy, to be ruined by allowing pervasive evil, as they call it, outside influences. And so there's obviously been hundreds of years of arguments or debates, debates as to what the true vision of Jewish life is in terms of how do we act, in terms of who we are, in terms of the greater culture. And of course, part of the difficulty is with thousands of years of wonderful, great, brilliant scholars, brilliant rabbis, great prophets, there are different visions. And the vision that we're given in this chapter is one that's much, much more restrictive. And certainly at times we can understand why that is necessary. And certainly segments of the Jewish community have taken that, as have people in other religions across the world.